storm hits Aden Airport, injures 6 passengers and causes chaos in the terminal. Houthis announced talks with Saudis are stalled due to unresolved issue of salaries. Iraq offers to mediate between warring parties in Yemen. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shazad Dilbey. A powerful storm hit Aden International Airport, injuring a number of passengers and causing chaos in the terminal. Ministry of Transport said 6 individuals, among them children, sustained injuries when the glass of the departure building collapsed upon them. The storm caused damage and authorities were forced to delay some flights for hours. The Houthi militia announced that the negotiations with Saudi Arabia reached a deadlock. Those statements made by Mahdi al-Mashat, who added that the unresolved issue of salaries is what made such talks reach a dead end. This report has more details.
The Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen have declared that talks with Saudi Arabia to end the region's crisis have halted, owing to a dispute over the source of funds to be offered to government officials as wages. According to the Houthi rebels' Sabah news agency, Mahdi al-Mashat, the leader of the group's Supreme Political Council, declared a break in discussions with Saudi Arabia during a speech at the start of the new school year in the capital Sana'a on Saturday. In recent months, Saudi Arabia and Houthi rebels have been exploring an updated and potentially permanent ceasefire in Sana'a, Yemen's Houthi-held capital, since the group usurped the Yemeni government over 8 years ago. Mashat stated that he was leading the negotiating group with Saudi Arabia, but that the discussions had come to a halt owing to a dispute over the source of payment for government worker wages. Due to the country's war and the central bank's division, around 500,000 state workers in Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen have had their salaries suspended for years. Though neither the Saudi government nor the Houthi rebels have made the contents of their original agreements public, Mashat's declaration indicated that Riyadh had promised to pay the employees' outstanding salaries. According to Mashat, Riyadh was urged to pay government officials' wages from Yemen's oil and gas income. Saudi Arabia intended to transfer oil and gas revenues to its central bank and then pay civil servants' salaries as charity. Meanwhile, 4 Houthi militiamen were killed in confrontations in Yemen between government forces and the Houthis. Yemen's capital Sana'a and several parts have been under the authority of the Iran-backed Houthis since September 2014. Since March 2015, coalition forces led by Saudi Arabia have been assisting Yemen's government in its fight against the Houthis. Yemenis are hoping that the nation's challenges and disputes would be resolved following the April 6 agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which marked the restoration of their ties after a 7-year hiatus.
Expressed its willingness to help find a solution to the war in Yemen. This came during a press conference held by Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein while receiving his Yemeni counterpart in Baghdad. This report has more details.
Iraq has offered to mediate between warring parties in Yemen in an effort to end the country's years-long war. Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein put forward the proposal during a visit from his Yemeni counterpart. Hussein emphasized during a press conference with Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed bin Mubarak that in Yemen there is currently an unofficial truce, and in practice there is some form of ceasefire. He expressed hope that this situation leads to a dialogue between all Yemeni parties. Hussein said Iraq is ready to help in this matter because it has good relations with all parties and can use this influence for stability and security in Yemen, as it can act on a regional level. Baghdad has constantly tried to highlight its role as a regional mediator and hosted several rounds of relatively low-level talks between regional rivals Iran and Saudi Arabia from April 2021. The Iraqi foreign minister reiterated that time has come to put an end to this war in Yemen and that there is still hope in reaching peace. In March, Riyadh and Tehran announced a resumption of diplomatic relations in a surprise deal brokered by Beijing. The reconciliation raised hope for peace in Yemen. In April, Riyadh's ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed al-Jaber, traveled to Sana'a as part of a plan to stabilize the truce. Although no deal was struck, Jaber later said warring parties are serious about ending the conflict in Yemen. Iran-backed Houthi rebels seized the capital Sana'a in 2014 before a Saudi-led military coalition intervened in the following year on the side of the country's internationally recognized government. Hundreds of thousands of people have died in the fighting or from indirect causes such as a lack of food in what the United Nations has called one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.
People in Ad-Dala called for revealing the fate of dozens of their children kidnapped by the Iranian-backed Houthi militia. Local sources said residents of Al-Hasha and Muriz districts called on the Houthi militia to reveal the fate of 27 children who got arrested from their homes a month ago.
عرفت نفسي وأنا أشتغل في عمل الصيد، يعني ما يقارب وعمري 14 سنة. أنا أعول 8 نفر في البيت. بالنسبة للدخل هو دخل يومي، تمام؟ على ما حول الله. أحيانا فوق، أحيانا تحت، أحيانا ما فيش. لو قدر الله واستوى شيء من خزان صافر وتسرب البترول، تمام، وأثر على الشعب المرجانية، ها؟ نحن طبعا ما لناش أي شغلانة ثانية، يعني والصياد ما يشتغل شيء مكان، يشتغل البحر بس. احنا حياتنا بسيطة جدا. اللي نتمناه يعني النقطة الأهم والأهم الإسراع في تصليح خزان صافر قبل أن تنتهي الشعوب المرجانية.
The United Nations announced that the technical teams to transfer oil from the Safer tanker to Nautica have started the salvage operation. This report has more details.
An international team is set to begin offloading oil out of the hull of Safer tanker moored off the coast of war-torn Yemen this week. It will mark the first concrete step in an operation years in the making, aimed at preventing a massive oil spill in the Red Sea. More than 1.1 million barrels of oil stored in the tanker, known as Safer, will be transferred to another vessel the United Nations purchased as a replacement to the rusting storage tanker. The rusting tanker is a Japanese-made vessel built in the 1970s and sold to the Yemeni government in the 1980s to store up to 3 million barrels of export oil pumped from fields in Ma'rib. The ship is 360 meters long with 34 storage tanks. The tanker is moored 6 kilometers from Yemen's western Red Sea, ports of Hudaida and Ras Isa, a strategic area controlled by the Houthi rebels, who are at war with the internationally recognized government. The vessel has not been maintained for 8 years, and its structural integrity is compromised, making it at risk of breaking up or exploding. Seawater had entered the engine compartment of the tanker, causing damage to the pipes and increasing the risk of sinking, according to international documents. For years, the UN and other governments as well as environmental groups have warned that a major oil spill or explosion could disrupt global commercial shipping through Bab el-Mandeb and Suez Canal routes, causing untold damage to the global economy. The tanker carries 4 times as much as the oil that spilled in the 1989 disaster of Alaska, which is one of the world's worst ecological catastrophes, according to the UN. The UN has for years campaigned to raise funds for the salvage operation, which costs $143 million, including purchasing a new storage vessel to replace the rusting tanker. The funding was a major challenge for the UN, which resorted to crowdfunding to help bridge the gap, but the operation still needs around $20 million to be completed. The replacement vessel, now named the Yemen, reached Yemen's coast earlier this month, and the salvage team managed to safely berth it alongside the Safer to start the ship-to-ship transfer of oil, amid unprecedented measures, including a small navy of technical and supply vessels to avoid missteps during the operation. Many thought it would never happen, until the salvage team has started, and they have up to 5 weeks to complete the whole operation.
A human rights center announced deterioration or the documentation of 78 Houthi violations committed in Taiz in June. The Human Rights Information and Training Center also added that 29 houses were damaged by shelling with mines. The Rights Radar Organization for Human Rights called on Eritrea to stick to regulations of fishing. Many Yemeni fishermen are exposed from time to kidnapping, detention, torture, and confiscation of their boats while fishing by Eritrean authorities. Media sources confirm that the Eritrean authorities have kidnapped 7,000 Yemeni fishermen since the outbreak of the war. A fire broke out in one displaced people's camp south of Hodeidah. The fire led to the complete destruction of 2 houses, and fragile displaced camps are often a subject of such fires. Coming next in the news. Thousands of displaced families continue to face dire humanitarian situation.
أبي مات في شارع 40 دحين أنا أشقى على أسرتي مع باقي اللي أنا أصرف عليهم كل شيء. أنا اسمي أنس وصيب سيف عمري 12 سنة. أنا أشتغل بورشة حديد من الساعة 7 للساعة 6. أحيانا أسرع أحيانا أقص أحيانا أرنق أحيانا أنقش أي حاجة أنا أعمل. لا الساعة لما تبدأ الساعة 6 أوقف. أنا وقفت الدراسة عشان ما فيش أحد يشقى على أسرتي. أدرس أخواني الباقي من دون 4 وأنا الخامس. أحلم إن أفتح ورشة أبي وأشقى على أسرتي وأندي لهم مصاري. وأدرس أخوتي الآخر الجامعات وأطبخ أي شيء.
Welcome back. Students of the Faculty of Mass Communication at Sana'a University announced a comprehensive strike. This comes in rejection of the Houthi militia decision to separate males from females, indicating that this decision gives a lower look at female students. A report issued by the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia confirmed that Yemen still faces a high risk of returning to violence. The report added that the situation in Yemen is witnessing a significant deterioration, which can cause renewed violence. It added that the deterioration is the result of the economic, climate, natural resource risks, in addition to the social risks. Thousands of displaced families in the desert areas face dire humanitarian situation. They lack basic needs like shelter and food. This report has more details.
The war in Yemen has turned this desert into a shelter for thousands of families who have been displaced from the oppression and war of the Houthi militia. They find themselves in an isolated desert that does not have the minimum necessities of life, so that their life becomes a great hardship and continuous suffering in obtaining the most basic services. Humanitarian interventions did not reach these camps like other camps located near the city, as it's more than 120 kilometers away from the city center of Ma'rib.
Displaced people in the tents are suffering from the negligence of the international community and the humanitarian organizations. People come to visit our camps, then they leave and do nothing about it. No one cares.
The deserts of Rawiq, El Abr and Safar include more than 3,000 displaced families who are distributed in scattered tents along the desert. In light of the harsh living conditions and the scarcity of food, water and shelter, while the humanitarian organizations confined its work to the center of the city and its surroundings.
نحن في القطاع السابع الذي يمتد من الجديدة إلى الوضيح.
We are living in the 7th district of this displaced camp. We are so far away from the city, which takes away the attention of the authorities and the humanitarian organizations who only care about the camps that are inside the city.
For years, thousands of Yemenis stayed in these tents, displaced in the desert after they were living in their homes safe and stable. And the tragedy increases even more as they continue to stay here, at a time when the efforts and opportunities to establish peace and end the war are still outstanding hopes, which requires the international community to intensify efforts to establish peace so that these people can return to their homes and end the suffering of millions of families.
A recent international report indicated that Yemen is one of the countries most vulnerable to high food insecurity in the Middle East. In addition, the report issued by the World Bank classified Yemen as a hotbed of hunger, indicating that it would need $22 billion to get out of the state of food insecurity. The World Bank expects the Yemeni economy to contract by 0.5%. In the latest report, however, the bank emphasized that the government's continued focus on monetary stability could help improve economic predictions. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Powerful storm hits Aden Airport, injures 6 passengers and causes chaos in the terminal. Houthis announce talks with Saudis are stalled due to unresolved issue of salaries. Iraq offers to mediate between warring parties in Yemen. This is the end of the news. It was Shazat Al-Bai. Thank you for watching.